We don't think that.
What do you feel has have like if you know is and that I'm sure takes some courage, right, to admit, right,
Yeah.
that I'm going through this emotion and that I'm that you know the body has been shocked by grief. How do you share or you know with a person of how to start this process? How do you activate this process of healing, literally, of
That's a
or
great
moving
question.
on from that grief?
So if I was with a client in session, I would have them close their eyes and I would do kind of like a guided meditation, very short though, where I would just say, I'd help them focus on their breathing. And then I'd say, okay, I just want you to feel where in your body do you have a lot of tension? Where are you feeling the weight of the world?
Hmm.
It's not very often that when I ask that and they kind of feel my heart, my shoulder, whatever, that tears don't start to happen because it's finally they stop being up here and they
Mm-hmm.
go and they're like, well, where am I feeling the weight of the world? It's it's all on my shoulders, it's all on my heart, or I feel it in my stomach. I feel, and then when they tap into that, that's when I kind of say grief speaks to you. Grief is like, yeah, I'm here. I've just been waiting. I thought
Yeah.
hopefully that maybe those digestion issues would kick in and you'd
Yeah.
realize, but you took some medicine that's not helping or it's not making it better. Or I thought by being tense up here, you'd start to go, hey, maybe I should relax a little more. So grief speaks to us and says, I'm here in a physical way. The same as
Mm-hmm.
we all know when you enter a room when a couple's had an argument and you can feel the tension, you just feel the like
Yeah.
something has happened. We feel energy like that. We feel emotions like that without even needing to know what was fought about. We know something uncomfortable has happened, and that happens in our
Yeah.
body. We feel that there's something not right that's stuck, but we don't know how to approach it.
To release it, or approach it, or even to release it. I mean, not only to release it, but how to approach it to release it.
Yes. Yeah. So meditation, I feel like a guided meditation. Some people are like, well, I can never clear my mind. That's why I like doing guided meditations because somebody's talking to you to tell you what to do next so that you're not going, and then tomorrow I've got to pick up this, and then the next day I got to go
Mm-hmm.
back to this. And you're allowing yourself to go, let me focus on what it is I'm supposed. And then you
Sound like
start.
you were going. Sound like Katie. Sound like you were going through my shopping list. I
That's
have
what I
to
was like.
get
I was like,
this. I have to get. But but you're right. It's you know we especially women, right? We have so much to do,
yeah,
and a lot of times that list is not
yeah,
complete from the day yet, from yesterday, from last week, from last month. And so all of this extra energy, right? This extra weight is on our shoulders.
yes.
How do you help a person process that while they're going through grief?
While they're going
Because
through
they
grief.
just moved to another, like you mentioned, another country, changed a job, or someone passed. You know, how do you help? Because you know, I'm hearing the busy side, and I'm hearing that they're becoming busy because they don't want to deal with the grief side.
Yeah,
So, how do you connect those two?
yeah. There's a great analogy in the book For the Love by Jen Hatmaker. And she says it's like juggling. And some of the things you juggle are glass balls that if you drop, they'll break and you can't fix them, you can't repair them. And then some are rubber. And when you drop them, they just keep bouncing and maybe somebody else
Mm,
picks it up. And so what I do is I help clients decide what are the glass balls, because we'll convince ourselves everything is glass. But what really is my health, my family, like the
mm,
paying the bill, like certain things like that. And then what are the rubber things? Maybe that community organization I volunteer for. If you're in the business world, some of my social media doesn't have to be to the level it's at while I grieve. I can take a step
mm,
back. You look at those things like maybe I'm overdoing it with dinners being so extravagant and I'm stressing myself out for making something for 45 minutes when maybe I start to change that and make it simpler. And then it becomes
mhm.
something easier, or ordering groceries online instead of going to the store, whatever it might be. You look at what's breakable, what's going to bounce, and then how you can simplify those things that you want to keep going. And those
Mm.
are huge. And I think a large part too is then asking for help and
Yeah.
saying to friends or family or getting support from a counselor or coach and going, I now know I need accountability to stick with
Mhm.
this, heal, and I need encouragement. Even if I don't respond to your text message, still check in on me every day. And
Yeah.
I, sometimes we don't even know what we need because we don't stop and ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, well, what do you need? You're like, no, I got it. I
Yeah.
got it. I don't need it. And you're like, I could
We have
use,
never done that. Yeah, we've never done that observation. We've never sat down to reflect on what's going on in our lives. Yeah.
we don't have to be superwoman. I think
Yeah.
it's exhausting.
And
But
I can only imagine some women that like, they may see everything on their calendar as glass. You know what I mean? It's
right, right.
like
Yes.
everything is glass because I'm like, like they're so interconnected with every item on their calendar. you know, this is when you wonder, it's like, and then I'm sure for some, something that's glass is rubber for others, right?
Right.
A
Exactly.
person may that tending to the husband is like glass, and another one say, hey, he's just like a rubber band. He'll bounce back, let me,
Right. He'll
so
start
it
making
just,
dinner.
yeah, you make, yeah, exactly. And then other ones, they feel like they have to be the one making dinner.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? What
Yeah.
we connect to and what we feel that's important, and connecting that even to the existing chapter. And then the interesting thing is, like, as you mentioned, is like sometimes we'll move to another chapter and we don't want to be in that chapter. We
Right.
want we want to be back into that. We want to be in the chapter that was existing. It was good for us. It was
Right. It was
great.
more fun back there. Yeah.
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 So
Definitely.
what inspired you to, thank you for sharing that, and of course apology for your mom, and
Right.
but you were able to take this strategy, this tragedy in your life, and now it's something that you're helping others go through. What inspired you to take that for others, like take,
Yeah.
to be able to help others with it? What inspired you?
I've always sort of been this way, but honestly, a part of it is, living the legacy of my mom. And
Mm,
one of the last text messages she sent me a couple days before she died was just talking about, because at that time I was working a lot with moms and like really helping them to feel a sense of identity still, and take better care of themselves, which was something she didn't do as a stay-at-home mom very well. And
mm,
she was talking about, and she I think she said the word we are going to help so many women really improve like how they
oh,
believe in themselves. And that then when she died was like, it's still a we,
yeah,
because when
yeah.
someone passes, it's I heard this wonderful analogy, and being pregnant, it touches my heart because when you're in the womb, you don't have a clue that just, inches away are human beings. There's lots of them,
Yeah,
they're putting
yeah,
their hands on, like you don't have that concept. And when people die, what if it's like that too, that we don't have that realization that they're here around us,
yeah,
they're still supporting, they're still cheering us on in whatever spiritual form you want to believe. But what if it's like that? And I've always felt that way. So to hear an analogy like that was like affirming, yeah, I feel like the
yeah,
biggest cheerleader of my life is still around and going,
yeah.
we're going to change the world. We're going to change these women. We're going to change grief. We're going to change.
That's beautiful.
And
Yeah.
it never left. And that I would say is an empowerment that my parents and really my mom gave me from childhood.
Mm,
You're
that's
here to do
beautiful.
great things. So
Yeah. That's awesome. And how do you see when you're working with women that are going through this next stage of shedding for something, sometimes it's just shedding
yeah.
of those experiences that's causing grief. Like what have you seen that happened in transforming these women's lives?
It's like they can live a more simple life and not feel anxious or nervous about it. Sometimes when we
Mm,
like clean out our calendar, we're like, I have nothing to do. Like no one wants to spend time with me. There's something wrong. and we feel it, they're at ease
Yeah.
having space. They're at ease
Yeah.
being alone with themselves. And if anything, it helps them step into like an empowered role of what they want to do in their lives, what they want in their relationships, what they want for their family. So
Mm.
it's everything we all talk about wanting to have happens because they go through the journey. And the problem is so many of us just don't, because we're kind of scared of. You mentioned those people who feel like everything on the calendar is a glass ball. That helps us feel needed.
Yeah.
You know, it affirms for us that we are needed, we are wanted, we're important. It has nothing to do about what actually the events are. It's
Mm.
about our own insecurities. And so once we
Yeah.
start to see those things don't actually fill the void of wanting to be needed and wanted and matter, in the world, and we start to see we have to fill that for ourselves, then we stop looking for it in other relationships or from our kids who
Yeah.
are too young to say thank you anyways, or from work that just exhausts us. We start to say, okay, I believe in myself and I matter, and
Yeah.
I don't need to fill up my schedule.
And what's interesting, what you're sharing is a lot of times those who are looking at the calendar as full of glass, they're not included in the calendar, are they? They're not glass.
No, exactly. And they treat themselves like a bouncing ball. We're not. We're part of the
Yeah.
glass. We're part of the glass. This is why burnout, especially this year, is so heavy because
Yeah.
people are so worn out. This has been a heavy year of emotions and thoughts and understanding the world differently. It makes sense that we're all feeling just exhausted.
Yeah. Like the world has turned to a big glass itself, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. It's such an interesting time. But the cool thing is, it's nobody's going through it alone. Though we
Mm.
all feel alone at times and isolated, because sometimes we are, we're actually like, there's no one in this world we can be like, I don't have a clue what you're experiencing by being quarantined and by going, like, we all get it. Here in
Yeah.
Germany, we still have to wear masks at most events and most things. And so you kind of see everybody give each other eyes like, I can't breathe, especially if you're pregnant. And you look at another pregnant woman, you're like, you know how this feels right now. Like, you
Yeah.
can't breathe. You feel like you're constantly like, everything's okay. Don't panic. An anxiety attack will come at any moment. Um, yeah, it's the whole world is going through
Yeah.
this together.
How how have you been able not to take all of this and bring it home to you?
Yeah. So all of it, meaning everything in the world and also the work that I do, or just specifically the grief work.
Just the grief work. Now that you've seen that you're taking this experience, you are a licensed, counselor and a grief specialist. Then you shared your story about, going through it yourself. Like, how have you seen that make changes for you,
Yeah.
and then be able to share that with those that you're working with?
I think largely it's changed my self-awareness. It's changed how
Mhm.
I help my girls go through. I mean, they're 6 and almost 4, but it's helped
Yeah.
me to change, like when they start to talk about my mom or
Mm.
talk about changes and that I'm not happy about that, and I just validate. I understand. I don't want to wear a mask. I know. I don't understand why this kid is being mean to me. Like, I sit with
Yeah.
their feelings. As a counselor, I always sat with their feelings in a certain way. And now I get even more like, that's just part of their journey and they need to feel these ways. I don't need to
Yeah.
replace it with something else, or don't think about that, or, oh, he probably just,
Exactly.
no, like, you're angry. Be angry.
Yeah.
Let me show you some good, healthy ways to be angry. I'm not going to try to distract you, you know? And even
And that's so important what you're saying, because I think a lot of the world wants you to do exactly that. Like, oh, forget it. Nothing happened. Keep moving. When in
right,
reality, we're
give
just
them
gonna end up holding this emotion. We're gonna end
yeah,
up holding this emotion. So it's important that we do process it. So
yeah,
who's doing the processing? Oh,
right.
who's doing the processing for the world?
Yeah, and we all are called to action in that. We have to be doing it, but it means changing our habits. And
Mm.
that we all know is very hard. If anybody here who's listening has tried to start running, there's always the good intention or go work out. There's the good intention, and then there's like, oh, I don't really want to. And maybe you do run once, but then you're like, it's hard to break old habits to start something new.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. And it's not
This is
comfortable.
yeah. This is why it's so important for someone to reach out, like someone like you. You help them go through this process and finish the process, right? So, like you said, we can start it, but are we going to finish?
Right. You've got
And
accountability. Yeah.
yeah, the accountability is quite important. Now,
Yeah.
when it comes to the self love, because I know that's part of it. As we mentioned, we're looking at how to help others. We're seeing other people in grief. You're like, how does a person start this? How does a person start this process?
Yeah. Of
Or
self-love.
how would they how do they reach out to you or someone like you to help them start this process?
So the first thing is I always have, even if somebody decides not to come and do counseling, if they just reach out and go, I'm thinking about it, I always have them sort of do a self-assessment. What is it they'd want to work on?
Hmm.
I want to love myself. Then the question is, what is already lovable about you that you already think is wonderful, even if it's something
Yeah,
as small? And then what are the things you don't? And then I
yeah.
ask, where are the messages from your childhood that told you those things are not lovable? Who said
Yeah.
or reacted a certain way or didn't want to hear you when you wanted to talk? Who put those voices in your head? Because often I'll say, like, a client will be really heavy in the emotion, and I'll go, whose voice is this? Like, who's it you're hearing in your head? And they'll be
Wow.
like, my mom, my dad, whoever. And you're like, oh. So once we know that, the self-love comes from kind of reparenting that inner child that still holds on to the belief that they're wrong. Somebody deserves punishment, so it must be me, or whatever comes up. I'm
Mhm.
failing. I'm constantly failing, which means I'll be rejected. And we have to reparent ourselves to realize we were allowed then to make mistakes and we're allowed now to make mistakes. And
Wow. And I love how you mentioned this. Like, whose voice is this?
yeah,
And it always, most of it, is the trauma really starts in childhood.
yeah,
It's when we were young, somehow when things were impressed upon us, it just stuck. It stayed with us and at times for life, unless there is someone that's holding us accountable to changing those habits, isn't it?
working on it. Yes. My husband and I were doing, I don't do therapy with him, but like we were processing something from his past. It didn't even have to do with his family. It was kids in his school that had bullied him one time. And for
Mm,
him, that created this script in his head that he needed to be a certain way in order to be accepted. And then when he
mm,
started parenting my daughter a certain way, I was like, whoa, where's this coming from? And he's like, because I want her to fit in. And I was like, okay, but like that's not about her. She's 6, and that's
yeah,
when that's just from that one. So it can't just be one thing that it becomes a core memory, and it sticks with us, and it impacts how we see ourselves and others. So when you hear
for
me say,
years.
"What's that voice?" Remember, it doesn't have to be a voice you heard over and over. It could have just been one really painful experience that you're like,
Hmm.
I will always think of
That's just
myself.
stuff. Yeah. Are you doing anything differently that you would say as a typical, like if you weren't a licensed counselor or a grief specialist, like something you're doing differently with your children to ensure that they have like a positive edge to how things impact them on a negative way?
I think the largest thing, sitting with them and trying not to change it, not like, let me distract you, but also going,
Mm-hmm.
like, here's the healthy ways to do it. And it's hard to say as a counselor, how am I not, but like, because it's all integrated now. But I would say those are the two biggest things. And we talk openly about feelings. I mean, I remember my oldest being 3 being like, I'm frustrated. But my in-laws were like, whoa, but my husband and I had taught her that word, like we wanted
Yeah,
her to have emotions words because we feel all sorts of stuff from as soon as we're out of the womb. But it's
I'm
not just
frustrated.
words, yeah. Or she knew the word bored. She understood. Bored meant like I've got nothing to do and I'm antsy and I'm just
Yeah.
bored. And
So
the
you
the book,
equipped her. You equipped her with the right words to communicate her feelings.
yeah. And I think that's huge. And I think counselor or not, every parent needs to be giving their kids the vocabulary, which means you need to know
Mm,
the vocabulary of
yeah.
what is it I'm feeling. I'm really irritated right now, but what's actually irritating me is that I'm anxious that I'm going to mess this up, or I'm sad
Mm,
and I don't want to feel it. So I'm irritated. Like we have to remember some emotions are kind of the iceberg where you just see the top, but underneath is a
mm,
lot more. And when you start to teach your kids that, you're really angry at this kid. Did he hurt your feelings? Are you sad? Did you feel scared? Were you anxious? You give them the deeper stuff so they can say that. I got really
yeah.
angry at him because he hurt my feelings, because he said something that made me embarrassed.
Mm,
There we go. We got at the core. Whereas adults,
yeah.
I'm just irritated at you. Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I'm in an argument with my husband, it's like I get my defenses up and then I realize, oh, I'm scared of this, or I don't want him to see my faults, or like we don't want to
Yeah.
say that in the moment. But that's
That's
really
fantastic.
fun. Yeah.
No, and that's a great tool to give them now when they're young to be able to express a lot of those great feelings of positivity, negativity, like you said, frustration, but to be able to communicate that, that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Working with kids as long as I did, and I worked in a locked facility with kids, inner city kids from Washington, D.C. and Boston, and seeing that they never had the vocabulary and then teaching them at 15 and 16 years old how to be like, I was scared when this happened to me when
Mm,
I was 7, and giving that, like, I was like, oh man, had you had these words back then, you wouldn't
yeah.
have to fight so much. You wouldn't have, like, it wouldn't feel this sense of I have to defend myself because nobody's here to support me kind of thing. I would have been able to have words to go, I need help and I'm going to find it here. You felt more empowered. And that was a big thing for me to go, my kids, I want them to have a vocabulary no matter what, in both languages. I want them to be able to say, this is what I need and this is what's happening. I think that's
Wow.
huge.
So with that, it's and it's interesting because as you mentioned, right? Do they speak 2 languages? Are they able to communicate those feelings in those 2 languages?
They do. It's pretty amazing. I think there's a couple English feelings that they haven't figured out that would be in German, especially if they're like angry at somebody. They're like, well, I didn't know how to say that to him. But in general, 3/4 of their day is in German, and then they have,
Yeah.
so in English. So they're quite bilingual, and we're very proud of it because it's so much easier for
Mhm.
them, whereas I'm still trying to learn the language. So it's like,
I
oh,
love it. I
yeah,
love it. I got to drink some water. 1 second.
no problem.
I started coughing, so
No problem.
no, but I mean, this is fantastic. I love how not not only are you serving other people and serving women and serving others and getting in touch with their grief and dealing with it, but now you're bringing it home. How
Yeah.
awesome it is to do something in life that you're sharing it among the world, but really living it, learning about it, living it, and then leading from it right within your home. So that's fantastic.
Thank you. I feel like you can't teach it if you're not struggling with it as well.
That's
I mean,
well,
you can
that's
always go, well, in theory, but if you're not, I get it. I get trying to avoid grief. I 100% get it. I got it this week. I was doing the
yeah,
same thing. So it's not that but I do know the skills and I go to them probably faster than an average person might.
yeah,
And that makes those of us who do the work on ourselves even better because we're willing to say, oh, I have my moments too. No, 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 I'm not judging you.
yeah.
I just want to show you a different way. Yeah.
Wow. And so if someone wanted to reach out to you, Katie, like how would they contact you?
So you can find me on my website. It's Katie Rossler, and that's RO without the two dots, if you can see that, SSLER.com, or on Instagram at Katie.Rossler. Those are the two easiest ways, and you can just reach out and write me.
Fantastic. And if you wanted to share one last advice with those who are listening or who are looking for a way to deal with grief, what would you love to share?
I would just empower you to remember you are really capable of feeling all of those emotions, thinking all of those thoughts, and it's not going to break you. Often we think this is going to break me. This, if this continues to happen, it's going to break me. When we use those words that break us down, of course it's going to break us, you know.
Mm,
But if we say, I am capable and I can, and I am stronger than I can imagine, you face the world much differently and you face grief much differently.
wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Katie, for being with us, sharing such, I mean, really giving us a whole different perspective of what grief is all about.
Thank you so much.
Well, everyone, I mean, it was phenomenal to hear how Katie shares with us the importance of facing our grief and dealing with it in different non-conventional ways. But what's more important and what I took away from this conversation is understanding that we must equip not only ourselves but those around us of how to deal with what we're going through and how to process it in a beautiful way so that we can be happier, healthier, and have more impact with those around us. With that, I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you on our next Your Inspired Journey.